Hey, John, I can see you. Can you hear me? John, comma.
Here I am.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good.
So. So can you put on the Facebook Live comments that the show starts at 8:10?
Sure. Okay.
Okay. All right. So good. So has Christine taken off?
Seems to have. She didn't come back on at 6:30, but she and I have been trading texts.
Okay, good. Would you just confirm with her that she'll stay on call until about 8:15?
Sure. Will you stay on call until about 8:15? Question mark.
Also, let me just look at my list. You said my name, Facebook. Okay, start from Facebook. Okay, checking. All right. So, is my video okay?
Video looks good.
Okay, and my sound is good.
Sound is good.
Let me just check it in my computer. All right, there we go. Test, test, test.
It's all good. All good.
Test, test. Okay.
Yes, still good.
All right, thank you. It's good. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my video. Oh, so we're streaming to Facebook Live, and the lobby cards are up.
It will be up once we're done here.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And good. So
And yes, Christine's going to be on call.
okay, great. And then I will. I think we should start recording at 7:30 since we had a stumble already tonight. If it's not recording, I'm going to have time to fix it.
Okay.
So I'll check in at 7:30 to confirm that we're recording and on Facebook Live. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. If I'm text me when you at 7, just in case I spaced out.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn off my video and mute.
Okay. And we're going to lobby card.
Great. Okay. There it is. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Sure.
Are you there, Joe? Hey, Joe. I'm just checking in.
Okay. Yeah, I am
Um,
here.
Oh, I see Facebook and recording. Okay, terrific. And video still looks good?
Looks good.
Okay, and let me just check really quick sound one last time. Check, check, check. Test, test.
All good.
All right, good. So I'll check back in with you just before 8.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Hey, Joe, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, so can you show me what the screen is going to be for the performance? Oh, perfect. Okay, good. So I'm in the right view. Okay, great. So you can go back to the lobby cards. Thank you. Great. And let's do a sound, please. Check, 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 check.
Sound is good.
Okay, let me just look at my thing. There we go. Test, test, and test, test.
Still good.
Okay, great. So good. And video looks good?
Video looks great.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so we'll begin shortly. Thank you so much for joining us. Yay! Hello, my name is John Fisher, and this is Dickens. One of my favorite actors is Simon Callow. He's a wonderful stage and screen actor, and you've seen him in some movies. He was one of those naked guys running around a pool, right? That pool in England, right? He's one of those naked guys in a room with a view. Wonderful, an exciting scene. He looked so into it. He looked so happy and free, naked on screen. And he was in 4 Weddings and a Funeral. He was a nice older gay man who was so much fun. And then he died in the 5th act, right? And it was horrible. But you see him smiling down from heaven. He was terrific in that. And he was also in The Phantom of the Opera. He played one of the opera managers, one of the guys who ran the opera company, and he revealed that he had this incredible singing voice. It was amazing. It just cut through everything. It was lovely. He's such a great actor. And in 1984, he wrote one of my favorite books on acting. It's called Being an Actor. And this book is great. It hits for all the right notes. And it's a real straightforward book. And in this book, he came out of the closet in 1984. Now, this was a big deal in 1984. You think, the 70s and the sexual liberation movement. Yeah, phooey. Nobody wanted to come out of the closet in Hollywood, in film, on stage in 1984, because, the agents, the producers said you won't be able to play any roles except gay roles. But Simon Callow came out of the closet in Being an Actor, and he said it was the most important personal thing he'd ever done, and also the most important political thing he'd ever done. Why? Because it freed him. It freed him. It made him feel himself. He found himself in the coming out process. Also, politically, he inspired other people. And that was his goal. In writing this book, he was trying to inspire young actors. And I was a young actor at the time, and he inspired me. I love this book. It's one of the best books on acting ever, because it's not just about how to act, which it is. It's also about how to audition, how to get a role, how to grow in the role, how to be ready for an audience. It's an incredible book. It's comprehensive. And he talks in that book about how acting isn't a trick. It's not hocus pocus. It's not a lot of weird methods, Stanislavski, Russian stuff, that you might not totally understand, that gets you in touch with vague things that you don't quite understand, like truth. It's not like that. It's a very practical and direct science. It's very simple, but it takes a lot of work. What he says is there are some basic tools that you have when you're preparing a performance. Now, one of them might seem to be the director, right? Because the director often says, it's not working, I'm not getting your character. He might give you direction, which is vague. So you go to the director and you say, well, can you help me? But most directors can't, because they're not actors. They're not acting teachers, they're directors. Their vision is broad, it's big, it's conceptual. So they might not know what to say to you, and they might say damaging, hurtful, harmful things like be better, be stronger, cry more, be more angry, be more pitiful. These things don't help an actor, they're effects. They're things that are effects for the audience. It doesn't tell the actor how to get there. So Simon Cowell says, forget about that. Most directors aren't gonna be able to help you. They're not bad people, it's just not really their job. So how do you find the character? How do you find to act in a play? Okay, first you begin with the play itself. Read the play over and over again. Find out everything you can about this character. The playwright has all the answers. That's what David Mamet has said. The answers are all there in the play. Shakespeare said that. The answers are all there within the text of the play. Also, study the character. Think about the character and his situation, his historical situation, his social situation, his family situation. And the play, with the playwright and the character, will tell you how to act. Now, this is the most important thing. This is the most important tool for acting in a play, yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to find yourself and free yourself so you can feel comfortable in your body, so you can know what you would do in this particular situation, the situation of the play. That's why coming out for him was so important, because as soon as he came out, he knew what to do on stage because his body was free. He knew how to express himself because he was no longer inhibited. He also knew what decisions that he would make, and those informed the character's decisions. So that's the best tool you've got to find a character. Bring yourself into the character, which means you have to know yourself, know all about yourself, and be comfortable in yourself. So think about it. Say you were cast as Hamlet, okay? Most famous role ever. It's a very difficult role. It's very complicated. It's very obtuse. It's very convoluted. So how do you play the role of Hamlet? Well, if you're a gay man, you begin to see some answers. Why? Because remember, his girlfriend is Ophelia. He doesn't get along with his girlfriend. He's always struggling to love his girlfriend. He's always being mean to her. Why? Because he's not interested in her. That will help you make a decision there. Okay, additionally, his best friend in the world who he loves is Horatio. Well, that makes sense. A gay man? Of course that makes sense. Now listen, a lot of gay men have problems with their mothers. Not problems, but difficulties with their mothers, right? Well, that explains his relationship with Gertrude. And finally, a lot of gay men feel like they were ignored by their fathers. Their fathers are absent. That explains the ghost. Hamlet's father is dead. Of course he's absent. He's just a ghost. So you see, you find your way to the character by using yourself. And you don't have to play Hamlet as gay, but those things make your knowledge accessible to the character and inform the character's decisions and make it authentic for you. Finally, he talks about the thing that many actors talk about, the audience. The audience is the last tool. They will teach you so much about a play. Richard Burton, great on stage, great on film. He said that at some point in the rehearsal process, he's had enough of the rehearsal. He's had enough of the director. He needs the audience because the audience will tell him what is funny, what is sad, what is dramatic. You can tell, you can hear them because they laugh, obviously, but also they get very quiet. Also, if they're bored, they start dropping things and squirming around and poking each other and coughing. The audience tells you what you need to do. Turn up the comedy. Go for the tragedy. Pick up the pace. Get very quiet because they're listening. You can hear them listen. So those are the tools, the play in combination with the playwright and the character, yourself. That's the big tool, according to Simon Callow. And finally, the audience. Those are the tools that will help you find the play. And he discovered those tools by coming out of the closet and being comfortable with himself and knowing what his body could do because he had freed it up. He had relieved it of repression. He went on to write another book, which is almost better than the first one. The first one was being an actor. The second book was Charles Laughton. Oh, it's amazing. It's about the great stage and screen actor Charles Laughton. Now, Charles Laughton was very similar to Simon Callow. Charles Laughton was the actor of size. He had a very unique face, but he embraced his girth, his size, and he knew himself. He knew that he was gay. He acted on his gayness, but he couldn't be out of the closet because it's 1930s Hollywood. But he knew that about himself, and knowing about that self freed up his body, allowed him to think clearly and straight, and allowed him to inform all of his great roles. And he is magnificent in his roles, and you can see him using himself, his unique, one-of-a-kind self in all of his roles. In Rembrandt, as the great Renaissance Dutch painter, the master painter Rembrandt, you can see him, the intellectuality, and he understands Rembrandt's otherness, his outsideness, his alienation as a painter, because of course Laughton was alienated as a gay man, and he puts that into his role, the way he thinks, the way he paints, the way he responds to people. It's all there. And of course, he took his sexual otherness and applied it to King Henry VIII in the wonderful Private Life of King Henry VIII. It is incredible. And he used his sexual otherness to inform Henry VIII's weird sexual otherness, where he married 6 times and beheaded a couple of his wives. That informed his work. And most magnificently, oh my God, this one, he knocks it out of the ballpark, Mutiny on the Bounty, where he plays the best Bligh ever. Incredible. And you can see all of the emotional, psychological turmoil in this man, even as he leads the British ship. Even as he commands, you can see that he's torn apart, the way he uses his body, the way he thinks, the way he responds. And he has to act opposite adorable, gorgeous Clark Gable, but he rises to it because he's processing it. He sees the envy, he feels the envy of Bligh, and he puts it into performance. He envies Clark Gable. Maybe he even desires Clark Gable, but he's certainly in competition with him because the pretty boy always wins. And Charles Laughton is not going to let the pretty boy win because he's also competitive. And he knows that about himself. And I swear to God, he wins this movie. You'll walk away from this movie like, wow, that is Charles Laughton's movie. He knocks it out of the ballpark, and it's all in his face and that elegant body of his. It's an amazing performance. But one of his greatest performances was a very subtle one. A very delicate one. It's in The Barretts of Wimpole Street. Now, on Broadway, in that play, the father, it is suggested, is sleeping with his daughter. Yes, that's suggested in the play. That is suggested in the play. It is suggested in the play. But when they made it into a movie, of course, they took it out. They had to take it out. They had to take it out of the movie, right? They couldn't have that in the movie. They could not have that in the movie. They couldn't have it in the movie because, of course, that was disgusting. But Charles Laughton understood this character. He understood this character's sexual alienation, doing something wrong, like being gay at the time, although much more heinous, sleeping with their daughter, but being gay at the time was considered wrong. He understood that. So he puts it into the character, and he allows us to see what's going on with this character. He allows us to see what's going on with this character, even though he doesn't have the lines to indicate it. He gives these suggestive looks and winks at the camera so that we get that the man is over possessive of his daughter because he's sleeping with her. It is a clever, clever performance and masterful. Simon Cowell went on to write several more books, and they're all masterpieces. His next one is about another completely unique actor, an actor of size and individuality, Orson Welles. It's a 3-part trilogy, and it is masterful because Orson Welles took his otherness, his uniqueness as an artist, and he put it into his roles, into his creations. It was magnificent. It was incredible. And it's all there in the book, this analysis of the character, of his otherness. It is incredible. Then he wrote a book about Wagner. Richard Wagner, the greatest opera composer of all time. Why? Because Wagner was outside. That's why Simon Cowell loves him. He is outside the mainstream. He wrote operas that were like nobody else's, not like any opera, no German opera that had preceded it. The operas of Mozart and Weber, not like them, not like the Italian operas, his contemporaries, Verdi and Puccini. His operas are not like anybody else's. They are completely unique because Wagner understood himself and he embraced himself. And he expressed his otherness in his work, this majestic individual view of the world. And then Simon Cowell wrote a book about Charles Dickens. This completely surprised me because, of course, Charles Dickens is probably the greatest English language novelist of all time. I mean, there's George Eliot, there are many others, but arguably he's the greatest, the most respected, the most read. And yet, what's this got to do with acting? But the subtitle tells you what it has to do with acting because the title is Charles Dickens and the subtitle is The Theater of the World. And he talks about how Dickens always wanted to be an actor. He'd auditioned as a young man to be an actor, but he got sick, he got a cold, he couldn't do it. So he went into law and then journalism, then became a novelist. It talks about how he loved the theater. He was obsessed with the theater and seeing particular performances. He would go every night. It talked about how he puts on amateur productions. He fell in love with an 18-year-old actress when he was 45 years old and married. He was mesmerized by the stage. It also talks about how his daughters overheard him saying the lines of his characters as he created the work. He was obsessed with the theater, but most significantly, at the end of his life, he embarked on some massive tours, reading tours, and these were not reading tours like we think in bookstores where the author reads. These were performances, they were productions, readings with a capital R. He took the stage and he played all of his characters and he gave it his all, and he almost died on stage like Moliere. He was so committed to performing his roles. He embarked on these magnificent tours and realized his dream of being an actor. As an author, he would always have a huge audience. And he knew his characters implicitly because he knew himself. He understood himself in the best Simon Cowell sense. He understood himself. And of course, he understood his characters because he had written them and he had verbalized them while creating them. So let's visit him. Let's visit Charles Dickens on one of his tours. Let's give the stage to Charles Dickens as he embarks on a reading tour in the United States of America. Thank you for joining me here this evening. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate your applause. It is a pleasure to be back in the United States, as always. Yes, indeed. Many people have speculated why I go on these reading tours. Well, they say that I need the money. Well, I obviously don't need the money. No, I've gone on these lonely tours because I want to raise money for worthy causes. The first one I did was to raise dollars for the Sick Children's Hospital. Yes, indeed, the great Common Street Hospital. Now, this was the first hospital that was set up for children. Yes, unworthy children, neglected children, abandoned children, children who were deemed not worthy of attention. They were given a bed. The problems were solved. The problems brought about by poverty, poor sanitation, neglect, and abuse. Overworked, underfed, these children. So I said that I would embark on a reading tour to read from some of my books to raise money, and I found that I loved it. It was majestic being on stage reading my characters. It was so exciting. And if truth be told, I also needed the money. Now, no matter what people tell you, if you ask them, why did you do this? And they say, well, I did it for the fun, or I did it because it was a noble cause. If they got paid, they needed the money. I don't care how rich they are. We all need money, even the rich ones. That is the way of the world. But also, I was, I think, running away from something. I was running away from my past, my heinous childhood, the difficulties of my young life. My parents, my family. I think I was running away from those thoughts. I put so much of it into my books, but eventually I found that it wasn't enough. I had to go on tour. I had to expend my energy somewhere. I used to walk all over London, exploring the city, exploring wherever I was, seeing the poverty, the misery, the crime of great cities, and wondering how these things were possible. And I had much to escape in my life. And that's why I embarked on this tour, because I was running away. So to begin my reading tonight, I will read a passage from Oliver Twist, which captures many of the things I saw as I walked around the cities, observing the crime, the neglected children, the abused children, the poverty, the great nation, Great Britain, neglecting the people in its very capital. That's what I put into my book, Oliver Twist. Now, as many of you know, because you've read the book, the big scene is when Bill Sikes goes to kill his girlfriend, Nancy. Why? Because Nancy has exposed him. Nancy is trying to protect poor little Oliver, the orphan. Oliver has found a protectress in Mei Lee. She has taken him into her home to protect him. But Bill Sikes, the villain, the housebreaker, has decided he's going to kidnap Oliver back for a ransom, and Nancy wants to protect little Oliver Twist, protect him from her boyfriend. So she goes to Mei Lee and she tells Mei Lee what's going to happen, and Mei Lee spirits Oliver Twist away. But she does not say, Nancy never says that Bill Sikes, her boyfriend, is going to be the kidnapper. She just says that he will be kidnapped, and Mei Lee takes the boy away. But when Bill Sikes finds this out, he is furious, and he sets off to find Nancy and to murder her for revenge. Without one moment's pause or moment's consideration, without once turning his head to the right or left, or raising his eyes to the sky, or lowering them to the ground, but looking straight before him with savage resolution, Bill Sikes's teeth so tightly compressed that the strained jaw seemed starting through the skin. The rubber held on, moving forward in his course, nor muttering a word, nor relaxed a muscle until he reached his own door, for he knew that Nancy was upstairs in his bed, his girlfriend. He opened it softly with a key, strode lightly up the stairs, and entering his own rooms, double-locked the door behind him, and lifting a heavy table, put it against the door to block it from escape. He then drew the curtain of his bed back. The girl was lying half-dressed upon it. He'd wakened her from her sleep, for she raised herself with a hurried and startled look. "Get up," said the man. "It is you, Bill," said the girl with an expression of pleasure at his return. "It is," was the reply. "Get up." There was a candle burning, but the man hastily drew it from the candlestick and hurled it under the gate. Seeing the faint light of early day without, the girl rose to withdraw the curtain. "Let it be," said Sikes, thrusting his hand before her. "There's light enough for what I've got to do to you." "Bill," said the girl, in a low voice of alarm, "why do you look that way at me?" The robber sat regarding her for a few seconds with dilated nostrils and heavy, heaving breast, and then, grasping her by the head and throat, dragged her into the middle of the room, and looking once towards the door, placed his heavy hand upon her mouth. "Bill, Bill," gasped the girl, wrestling with the strength of mortal fear. I won't scream or cry, not once. Hear me, speak to me, tell me what I have done." "You know what you've done, you she-devil," returned the robber, suppressing his breath. "You were watched tonight. Every word you said was heard. Then spare me. Spare me for the love of heaven as I spared yours. Spare my life, I've spared yours. Spare my life, rejoined the girl, clinging to him. Bill, dear Bill, you cannot have the heart to kill me. Oh, think of all I have given up only this one night for you. You shall have time to think and save yourself this crime. I will not lose my hold. You cannot throw me off, Bill. Bill, for dear God's sake, for your own, for mine. Stop before you spill my blood. I have been true to you. Upon my guilty soul I have. The man struggled violently to release his arm, but those of the girl were clasped around his, and tear her as he would, he could not tear them away. Bill, 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 cried the girl, striving to lay her hand upon his breast. The gentleman and that dear lady, Maylie, told me tonight of a home in some foreign country where I could end my days in solitude and peace. Let me get there. Let me see them again and beg them on my knees to show you the same mercy and goodness. Show it to you, and let us both leave this dreadful place and far apart lead better lives, and forget how we have lived except in prayers, and never see each other evermore. It is never too late to repent. They told me so. I feel it now. But we must have time, a little more time. The housebreaker freed one arm, and he grasped his pistol. The certainty of immediate detection, if he fired, flashed across his mind, even in the midst of his fury. And he beat it twice with all the force he could summon upon the upturned face that almost touched his own. The housebreaker freed one arm and grasped the pistol and hit her again. Tongue! She staggered, fell, nearly blinded with the blood that rained down from the deep gash in her forehead. But raising herself up with difficulty on her knees, drew from her bosom a handkerchief, Rose Maylie's own, and holding it up in her folded hands as high towards heaven as her feeble strength would let her, breathed one prayer for mercy to her Maker. It was a ghastly figure for him to look upon. The murderer staggered backward to the wall and shouting out, he shut the sight from his view with his hand, seized a heavy club and struck her down again. Time! Of all bad deeds that under cover of the darkness had been committed within London's bounds since night hung over it, that was the worst. Of all the horrors that rose with an ill scent upon the morning air, that was the foulest and most cruel. The sun, the bright sun that brings back not light alone, but new life and hope and freshness to man, burst upon the crowded city in clear and radiant glory. Through costly colored glass and paper-mended window, through cathedral dome and rotten crevice, it shed its equal ray. It lighted up the room where the murdered woman lay. It did. He tried to shut it out, but it would stream in. If the sight had been a ghastly one in the dull, early hours of morning, what was it now in all that brilliant light? He had not moved. He had been afraid to stir. There had been a moan and motion of Nancy's hand, and with terror added to hate, he had struck and struck again. Once he threw a rug over her, but it was worse to fancy the eyes and imagine them moving towards him than to see them glaring upwards, as if watching the reflection of the pool of gore that quivered and danced in the sunlight on the ceiling. He plucked it off again, and there was the body, mere flesh and blood, no more. But such flesh, such blood. He struck a light, kindled the fire, and thrust the club with which he had killed her into it. There was human hair upon that club, at the end of it, which blazed and shrunk into a light cinder and, caught by the air, whirled up the chimney. Even that frightened him, sturdy as he was. But he held the weapon till it broke in the fire, and then piled on the coals to burn it away and smoulder into ashes. He washed himself. He rubbed his clothes. There were spots that would not be removed, blood spots, but he cut the pieces out and burnt them also. How those stains were dispersed about the room. The very feet of his dog were bloody. All this time, he had never once turned his back upon the corpse. No, not for a moment. Such preparations completed, he moved backwards towards the door, dragging the dog with him, lest he should carry out new evidence of the crime into the streets. He shut the door swiftly, locked it, took the key, and left the house. Those of you who know my work might have heard that Nancy's murder was meant to be Meilie's murder, but I had to change it because Meilie was based on a woman who I adored greatly. Her name was Mary. She was the sister of my wife, Catherine, and at 17, she died. She was my devoted friend. I was closer to her, I think, than I was to my wife, Catherine, and she died in my arms. So when it came to writing Oliver Twist, I could not kill her again. Not my Mary, not as Meilie. So I shifted her death to Nancy. Poor Nancy, who tried to save Bill and Oliver Twist as well. I put my great love for Mary, Catherine's sister, now departed. I put my great love for her into another character, into Miss Pross, from my novel A Tale of Two Cities. Now, Miss Pross is the governess for Lucy and little Lucy, and for the Dr. Evrémonde. This is an English family which has gone to Paris during the Revolution, during the time of the Committee of Public Safety, who were guillotining everyone, not just the king, but anyone suspected of being a traitor. And Lucy and little Lucy and the Dr. Evrémonde are accused of being traitors. And dispatched to get them and bring them to the guillotine is Madame Defarge, that wicked villainess who knitted as people were guillotined. She goes to the home of Lucy, but Lucy, little Lucy, and the doctor have all been sent away by Miss Pross, their English governess, who was there to protect them. And now Miss Pross will have to confront Madame Defarge, the scariest of the French guillotiners. Miss Pross recoiled and cried out, for she saw a figure standing in the room. The basin she was holding fell to the ground broken, and the water flowed to the feet of Madame Defarge. By strange stern ways and through much staining blood, those feet of Madame Defarge's had come to meet that water. Madame Defarge looked coldly at her and said, "The wife of Evrémonde. Where is she?" It flashed upon Miss Pross's mind that the doors were all standing open and would suggest that they had all flown. Her first act was to shut them. There were 4 doors in the room, and she shut them all. She then placed herself before the door of the chamber which Lucy had occupied. Madame Defarge's dark eyes followed her through this rapid movement and rested on her when it was finished. Miss Pross had nothing beautiful about her. Years had not tamed her wildness or softened her grimness or any aspect of her appearance, but she too was determined, a determined woman in a different way, as determined as Madame Defarge, and she measured Madame Defarge with her eyes every inch. "You might, from your appearance, be the wife of Lucifer," said Miss Pross in her breathing. "Nevertheless, you shall not get the better of me. I am an Englishwoman." Madame Defarge looked at her scornfully, but still with something of Miss Pross's own perception that they too were at bay. She saw a tight, hard, wiry woman before her. She knew full well that Miss Pross was the family's devoted friend. Miss Pross knew full well that Madame Defarge was the family's malevolent enemy. On my way yonder, said Madame Defarge reasonably, with a slight movement of her hand towards the fatal spot of the guillotine, where they reserve my chair and my knitting for me. I am come to make my compliments to her in passing. I wish to see her. I know your intentions are evil, said Miss Pross, and you may depend upon it. I'll hold my own against them. Each spoke in her own language. Neither understood the other's words. Both were very watchful and intent to deduce from look and manner what the unintelligible words might be. It would do her no good to keep herself concealed from me at this moment behind that door, said Madame Defarge. Good patriots will know what that means. Let me see her. Go tell her that I wish to see her. Do you hear? If those eyes of yours were bed winches, returned Miss Pross, and I was an English four-poster, they shouldn't lose a splinter of me. No, you wicked foreign woman, I am your match. Madame Defarge was not likely to follow those idiomatic remarks in detail, but she so far understood them as to perceive that she was set at naught. Woman, imbecile, and pig-like, said Madame Defarge, frowning. I take no answer from you. I demand to see her. Either tell her that I demand to see her, or stand out of the way of the door and let me go to her. This was an angry, explanatory wave of her right hand. I little thought, said Miss Pross, that I should ever want to understand your nonsensical language, but I would give all I have, except the clothes I wear, to know whether you suspect the truth or any part of it. Neither of them for a single moment released the other's eyes. Madame Defarge had not moved from the spot where she stood when Miss Pross first became aware of her, but now she advanced one step. I am a Briton, said Miss Pross. I am desperate. I don't care an English tuppence for myself. I know that the longer I keep you here, the greater hope there is for my ladybird, my Lucy. I'll not leave a handful of that dark hair upon her head. None of it if you lay a finger on me. Thus Miss Pross, with a shake of her head and a flash of her eyes between every rapid sentence, and every rapid sentence a whole breath. Thus Miss Pross, who had never struck a blow in her life, but her courage was that of an emotional nature, and it brought the irrepressible tears into her eyes. Yes, there they were, tears flowing. This was a courage that Madame Defarge so little comprehended as to mistake for weakness. Ha, ha, said Madame Defarge. You poor wretch, what are you worth? I addressed myself to that doctor. Then she raised her voice and called out, Citizen Doctor, wife of Evremonde, child of Evremonde, any person but this miserable fool answer the citizeness Defarge. Perhaps the following silence, perhaps some latent disclosure in the expression of Miss Pross's face, perhaps a sudden misgiving apart from either suggestion, whispered to Madame Defarge that they were gone. 3 of the doors she opened swiftly and looked in. Those doors lead to rooms, and they're all in disorder. There has been hurried packing. There are odds and ends upon the ground. There is no one in that room behind you. Let me look! Never, said Miss Pross. You understood the request as perfectly as Madame Defarge understood the answer. If they are not in that room, they are gone, and can be pursued and brought back, said Madame Defarge to herself. As long as you don't know whether they are in that room or not, you are uncertain what to do, said Miss Pross to herself. And you shall not know that, if I can prevent your knowing it, and know that or not know that, you shall not leave here where I can hold you. I have been in the streets from the first. Nothing has stopped me. I will tear you to pieces, but I will have you from that door, said Madame Defarge. We are alone at the top of a high house in a solitary courtyard. We are not likely to be heard, and I pray for bodily strength to keep you here, while every minute you are here is worth 100,000 guineas to my darlings, to Miss Lucy and little Lucy, said Miss Pross. Madame Defarge made at the door. Miss Pross, on the instinct of the moment, seized her around the waist in both her arms and held her tight. It was in vain for Madame Defarge to struggle and to strike Miss Pross with the vigorous tenacity of love, always so much stronger than hate. Clasped her tight and even lifted her from the floor in the struggle that they had. The two hands of Madame Defarge buffeted and tore the face of Miss Pross, with her head bowed down, held her around the waist, and clung to her with more the hold of a drowning woman. Soon Madame Defarge's hand ceased to strike and felt at her encircled waist. She is reaching for her knife. "It is under my arm," said Miss Pross in smothered tones. "You shall not draw it. I am stronger than you. I bless heaven for it. I'll hold you till one or the other of us faints or dies." Madame Defarge's hands began moving towards her bosom. Miss Pross looked up. She saw what it was in her bosom, a pistol. She struck at it. Struck out. A flash! And then a crash. And Miss Pross stood alone, blinded with smoke. All this was in a second. As the smoke cleared, leaving an awful stillness, it passed out on the air like the soul of the furious woman whose body lay lifeless on the ground. In the first fright and horror of her situation, Miss Pross passed the body as far from it as she could and ran down the stairs to call for fruitless help. Happily, she bethought herself of the consequences of what she did. In time, she checked herself and went back. It was dreadful to go back in that door again, but she did go in, and even went near it to get the bonnet and the other things that she must wear, the habiliments of Madame Defarge. These she put on, and out on the staircase, disguised now as Madame Defarge, first shutting and locking the door and taking away the key. She then sat down on the stairs a few moments to breathe and to cry, and got up and hurried away. Tale of Two Cities, France and London. And the wages of revolution. Although I'm not adverse to revolution, if it will bring about change, what comes after it? France was hard. I wrote also of my father. He struck me deeply. The first 11 years of my life were glorious, but then my father was sent to debtor's prison. He had spent much too much money. It was there that I learned the evilness of prisons, the abuse, the terror for the prisoners. I wrote about a prison in my novel Great Expectations, the hulks, the massive old warships out in the Channel that were turned into prisons for debtors, for criminals of all kinds. And in this book, little Pip is an orphan who's left with his much older sister who abuses him, hates him, makes him feel worthless. Little Pip, the little boy, is out on the moors and he encounters an escaped convict from the hulks. His name is Magwitch. And soon Magwitch is fighting with another convict. They are embroiled in it and then they are taken back to the hulks. And years later, Pip becomes a gentleman. He is given great expectations by a mysterious benefactor. He doesn't know who it is. He imagines it is Miss Havisham. He wants it to be Miss Havisham. But it turns out that in fact it is Magwitch, that convict he saw on the moors as a boy. And Magwitch has escaped his exile in Australia and come back to England to see the young gentleman he has created in Pip. Now, Pip takes care of Magwitch and determines that he must get him out of England because as an escaped exile back in England, he has now forfeited his life. If apprehended by the police, he will be executed. So they determine that they must get Magwitch on to a steamer to the continent. His friend Herbert Pocket, Pip, and another friend, Startop, then put Magwitch on to a rowboat. They head out into the channel of the river, the main channel, and they wait for the steamship Hamburg, which they hope will stop, take Magwitch, and transport him to the continent. But as they're waiting, they see another small boat, a galley, set out from the opposite shore and head right towards them. But it was 1:30 before we saw the smoke of the Hamburg. And soon afterwards, we saw behind it the smoke of another steamer. As they were coming on at full speed, we got the 2 bags ready and took that opportunity of saying goodbye to Herbert, Pocket, and Starhope. We had all shaken hands cordially, and neither Herbert's eyes nor mine were quite dry, when I saw a 4-oared galley shoot out from under the bank, but a little way ahead of us, and row out into the same track as ours. A stretch of shore had been as yet between us and the steamer's smoke, by reason of the bend and the wind of the river, but now she was visible, coming head on. I called to Herbert in Startop to keep before the tide, to row us before the tide, that she might see us line by for her, and abjured Magwitch to sit quite still, wrapped in his cloak. He answered cheerily, "Trust me, my dear boy, trust me," and sat like a statue. Meanwhile, the galley, which was very skillfully handled, had crossed us, let us come up with her, and fallen alongside, leaving just enough room for the pulling a stroke or two. The pulling of the oars. The room was left, and there we were. Side by side, she kept alongside, drifting when we drifted, and pulling a stroke or two when we pulled. Of the 2 sitters in the galley, one held the rudder lines and looked at us attentively, as did the rowers. The other sitter was wrapped up, much as Magwitch was, and seemed to shrink and whisper some instruction to the steerer as he looked at us. Not a word was spoken in either boat. Startop could make out after a few minutes which steamer was first, and gave me the word "Hamburg" in a low voice as we sat face to face. She was nearing us very fast, and the beating of her paddles grew louder and louder. I felt as if her shadow were absolutely upon us when the galley hailed us. "Hail!" I answered, "Hail!" And then the man in the galley said, "You have a returned transport there, an exiled criminal." Said the man who was holding the lines, "That's the man wrapped in the cloak. His name is Abel Magwitch, otherwise known as Provis. I apprehend that man and call upon him to surrender, and you to assist. I apprehend him." At the same moment, without giving any audible direction to his crew, he ran the galley aboard of us. They pulled one sudden stroke ahead, had got their oars in, had run athwart us, and were holding on to our gunwale. Before we knew what they were doing, this caused some confusion, a great amount of confusion on board the steamer, and I heard them calling to us, "Ahoy! Ahoy!" and heard the order given to stop the paddles, and heard them stop. Driving down upon us irresistibly, this massive steamer. In the same moment, I saw the steersman of the galley lay his hands on the prisoner's shoulder, and saw that both boats were swinging around and around in the force of the tide, with a huge steamer bearing down on us, and saw that all hands on board the steamer were running forward quite frantically. "Ahoy! Ahoy!" Still in the same moment, I saw the prisoner start up, lean across his captor, and pull the cloak from the neck of the shrinking sitter in the galley. Still in the same moment, I saw that the face disclosed was the face of the other convict I had seen fighting with Magwitch so long ago. Still in the same moment, I saw the face tilt backward, with a white terror on it that I shall never forget, and heard a great cry on board the steamer, and a loud splash in the water, and felt the boat sink beneath me. It was but for an instant that I seemed to struggle with 1,000 mill wears and 1,000 flashes of light. That instant passed, I was taken on board the galley. Herbert was there, and Startop was there, but our boat was gone. The 2 convicts were gone. But with the cries aboard the steamer and the furious blowing off of her steam, and her driving on, and our driving on, I could not at first distinguish sky from water or shore from shore. But the crew of the galley righted her with great speed, and pulling certain swift strokes ahead, lay upon their oars every man looking silently and eagerly at the water astern. Presently, a dark object was seen in it, bearing towards us on the tide. No man spoke, but the steersman held up his hand. And all softly backed water and kept the boat straight and true before it. As it came near, the dark object I sought to be Magwitch, my benefactor, a criminal now captured. Swimming, but not swimming freely, he was taken on board and instantly manacled to the wrists and the ankles. The galley was kept steady, and the silent, eager lookout at the water was resumed. But the Hamburg steamer had gone, and everybody knew that it was hopeless now. At length we gave it up, pulled under the shore towards the tavern we had lately left, where we were received with no little surprise. Here I was able to get some comforts for Magwitch. Provost no longer, who had received some very severe injury in the chest and a deep cut in the head. He told me that he believed himself to have gone under the keel of the steamer and to have been struck on the head in rising. The injury to his chest, which rendered his breathing extremely painful, he thought he had received against the side of the galley. He said. He added that he did not pretend to say what he might or might not have done to the other convict, but that in the moment of his laying his hand on his cloak to identify him, that villain had staggered up, staggered back, and they had both gone overboard together, when the sudden wrenching of him, Magwitch, out of our boat, and the endeavor of his captor to keep him in it had capsized us. He told me in a whisper that they had gone down together, fiercely locked in each other's arms, and that there had been a struggle under the water, and that he had disengaged himself, struck out at the other convict, and swum away. My detestation of prisons was carried forward into many discussions of them. I discovered them through my father, but I knew that they were a heinous aspect of our culture. Many people feel that my autobiography is David Copperfield, and I did put much of my life into it. But more than anything, I was interested in the adventures of a young man. They climaxed in an outrageous scene, which I will conclude my evening with. But first, I'd like to discuss loss, the loss of children. There was much child mortality in my day. Disease, sanitation, overwork, abuse, and also neglect. My father ignored me. They were very kind to me until I was 11, but I was not noticed. I put much of this into my book, Dombey and Son. In Dombey and Son, little Paul Dombey is 6 years old and dying. He's never seen his mother. She died when he was born. His father dotes on him, adores him. And he adores his sister Florence, Floy. But there is no love in the father for the sister, none at all. Both Florence, Floy, his dear sister, and his papa, Mr. Dombey, adore little Paul. In this chapter, he lies on his deathbed, and I use the metaphor of the river flowing to the sea to capture a sense of impending death. Chapter 16, what the waves were always saying. Little Paul had never risen from his little bed. He lay there listening to the noises in the street, quite tranquilly, not caring much how the time went, but watching it and watching everything about him with observing eyes. His fancy had a strange tendency to wander to the river, which was reflected on the wall of his room. He knew the river was flowing through the great city, and now he thought how black it was, and how deep it would look reflecting the hosts of stars, and more than all, how steadily it rolled away to meet the sea. As it grew late in the night, and footsteps in the streets became so rare that he could hear them coming, count them as they paused, and lose them in the hollow distance, he would lie and watch the many-colored ring about the candle, and wait patiently for day. His only trouble was the swift and rapid river. He felt forced sometimes to try to stop it, to stem it with his little childish hands or choke its way with sand. And when he saw it coming on, resistless, he cried out. But a word from Florence, who was always at his side, restored him to himself. And leaning his poor head upon her breast, he told Florence, his dear sister, of his dream and his smile. Thus, the flush of the day and its heat and light would gradually decline, and again the golden water would be dancing on the wall. The people round him changed unaccountably, except Florence. Florence never changed. And his father, sitting with his head upon his hand at the foot of the bed, he never changed. Old Mrs. Pipchin, dozing in an easy chair, often changed to Miss Tox or his aunt. And Paul was quite content to shut his eyes again and see what happened next, without emotion. But this figure, with his head upon its hand, returned so often, and remained so long, and sat so still and solemn, never speaking, never being spoken to, and rarely lifting up his face, that Paul began to wonder languidly if it were real, and if the night time saw it sitting there. With fear, he felt fear for this person. "Florrie," he said, "what is that?" "Where, dearest?" "There, at the bottom of the bed." "That's nothing, dear, except Papa." The figure lifted up its head and rose, and coming to the bedside said, "My own boy, don't you know me? Don't you know your Papa?" Paul looked it in the face and thought, was this my father? But the face, so altered to his thinking, thrilled while he gazed, as if it were in pain. Before he could reach out both his hands to take it between them and draw it towards him, the figure turned away quickly from the little bed and went out at the door. Paul looked at Florence with a fluttering heart, but he knew what she was going to say and stopped her with his face against her lips. The next time he observed the figure sitting at the bottom of the bed, he called to it, Don't be sorry for me, dear Papa. Indeed, I'm quite happy." His father coming and bending down to him, which he did quickly without first pausing by the bedside, Paul held him around the neck and repeated those words to him several times, and very earnestly, "Don't be sorry for me, dear Papa. Indeed, I am quite happy." Whether it were day or night, he called it out. "Don't be sorry for me. I am happy, Papa." This was the beginning of his always saying in the morning that he was a great deal better, though he was always a great deal worse, and that they were to tell his father so. How many times the golden water danced upon the wall, how many nights the dark, dark river rolled toward the sea in spite of him, Paul never counted, never sought to know. If their kindness or his sense of it could have increased, they were more kind, and he more grateful every day. But whether there were many days or few appeared of little moment now to the gentle boy. One night he had been thinking of his mother and her picture in the drawing room downstairs, and had thought she must have loved sweet Florence better than his father did. To have held her in her arms when she felt that she was dying, for even he, her brother, who had such dear love for her, his dear sister, could have no greater wish than that. The train of thought suggested to him to inquire if he had ever seen his mother, for he could not remember whether they had told him yes or no, the river running very fast and confusing his mind now more than ever. "Florrie, did I ever see Mama?" "No, darling, why?" "Did I ever see any kind face like Mama's, looking at me when I was a baby, Florrie?" He asked incredulously, as if some vision of a face before him. "Oh, yes, dear. Whose face, Florrie?" "Your old nurse's, often." "And where is my old nurse?" said Paul. "Is she dead too, Florrie? Are we all dead except you?" And Florence, with her face quite colorless, but smiling, held his head upon her arm Her arm trembled very much. Show me that old nurse, Floy, if you please. She's not here, darling. She shall come tomorrow. Thank you, Floy. Paul closed his eyes, and those words, they filled him with hope, and he fell asleep. When he awoke, the sun was high, and the broad day was clear and warm. He lay a little, looking at the windows, which were open, and the curtains rustling in the air and waving to and fro. And then he said, Floy, is it tomorrow? Is she come? Is my sweet old nurse come? Who is this? Is this my old nurse? Said the child, regarding with a radiant smile a figure coming in. Yes, yes, no other stranger would have shed those tears at the sight of him and called him her dear boy, her pretty boy, her own dear blighted child. No other woman would have stooped down by his bed and taken up his wasted hand and put it to her lips and breast as one who had some right to fondle it. No other woman would have so forgotten everybody there but him and Floy, and been so full of tenderness and pity as his old nurse. Floy, this is a good, kind face, said Paul. I am glad to see it again. Don't go away, old nurse. Stay here. But where is Papa? He felt his father's breath upon his cheek before the words even parted from his lip. Now lay me down, he said. If Floy, come close to me. Let me see you, please. Sister and dear little brother wound their arms around each other, and the golden light came streaming in and fell upon them, locked together. How fast the river runs between its green banks and the rushes, Floy. But it's very near the sea. I hear the waves, said Paul. They always said so. Presently he told her that the motion of the boat upon the stream was lulling him to rest. How green the banks were now, how bright the flowers growing on them, and how tall the rushes. Now the boat was out at sea, but gliding smoothly on, and now there was a shore before him. But who stood at the bank? He put his hands together, as he'd been used to at his prayers. He did not remove his arms to do it, but they saw him fold them so behind her neck. Mama is like you, Floy. I know her by the face. It's Mama. The light about her head is shining on me as I go. The golden ripple on the wall came back again, and nothing else stirred in the room. The old fashion, the fashion that came in with our first garments and will last unchanged until our race has run its course, and the wide firmament is rolled up like a scroll. The old fashion, death. Oh, thank God, all who see it, for that older fashion yet of immortality. And look upon us, angels of your children, with regards not quite estranged, when the swift river bears us to the ocean. And of course, there was adventure, wild, crazy adventure, which always informed my work. I loved adventure. I had many adventures myself. I used to walk everywhere in London. Any city I went to, I walked and walked and walked, sometimes 30 miles a day. I was in a train wreck. I was one of the few survivors. I had to spare my manuscript from the train wreck. They wanted to make me a hero because I offered brandy to people and took care of them. I said, no, I don't want the publicity. I was traveling with someone I shouldn't have been traveling with. But there was always adventure. And in David Copperfield, a storm. A crazy storm, a storm for the ages that went on for days and days. And David is in his bed, having survived the first day of the storm, when he is woken up and he sees on the shore eventually his dear friend Ham, who will become a hero of the storm. It was broad day, 8 or 9 o'clock, the storm raging, and someone knocking and calling at my door. What is the matter? I said. A wreck close by. I sprung out of my bed and asked, what wreck? A schooner from Spain or Portugal laden with fruit and wine. Make haste, sir, if you want to see her. It's thought down by the beach she'll go to pieces at every moment. The excited voice went clambering along the staircase, and I wrapped myself in my clothes as quickly as I could and ran into the street. Numbers of people were there before me, all running in one direction to the beach. I ran the same way, outstripping a good many, and soon came to face the wild sea. The sea, having upon it the additional agitation of the whole night, was infinitely more terrific than when I had seen it last. Every appearance of it had been presented and grown. It bore the expression of being swelled, and the height to which the breakers rose, and looking over one another, bore one down upon another, and rolled in interminable hosts. Was most appalling in the difficulty of hearing anything but wind and waves, and in the crowd and the unspeakable confusion, and my first breathless efforts to stand against the weather myself. I was so confused that I looked out to sea for the wreck and saw nothing at all but the foaming heads of the great waves. A half-dressed boatman standing next to me pointed with his bare arm, a tattoo arrow on it, pointing in the same direction to the left. Then, oh great heaven, I saw it close upon us, the ship in the storm. One mast was broken short off, 6 or 8 feet from the deck. It lay over the side, entangled in a maze of sail and rigging, and all that ruin, as the ship rolled and beat, which she did without a moment's pause, and with a violence quite inconceivable, beat the side as if it were to stave it in. Some efforts were even being made on the deck to cut this portion of the wreck away, for as the ship, which was broadside to us, turned towards us in a rolling, I plainly descried her people at work with axes, especially one active figure with long curling hair, conspicuous among the rest, with his axe, trying to cut it away. But a great cry, which was audible even above the water and wind, rose from the shore at this moment. The sea, sweeping over the rolling wreck, made a clean breach and carried men, spars, casks, planks, bulwarks, heaps of such toys into the boiling surge. The second mast was yet standing, with the rags of a rent sail and a wild confusion of broken cordage flapping to and fro. The ship had struck once, the same boatman hoarsely said in my ear, and then lifted in and struck again. I understood him to add that she was parting amidships, and I could readily suppose so, for the rolling and beating were too tremendous for any human work to suffer long. As he spoke, there was another cry of pity from the beach. 4 men arose with the wreck out of the deep, clinging to the rigging of the remaining mast. Uppermost, the active figure with the curling hair, still with his hatchet, trying to break away the mast and the ropes. There was a bell on board, and as the ship rolled and dashed, this bell, like a desperate creature driven mad, now showing us the whole sweep of her deck as she turned on her beam end towards the shore, now nothing but her keel as she sprung wildly over the turned towards the sea. The bell rang, pung, pung, and its sound, the knell of those unhappy men, was borne towards us on the wind. Pung, pung. Again we lost her, and again she rose. 2 men were gone. The agony on the ship increased. The agony on the shore increased. It was horrible. Men groaned and clasped their hands. Women shrieked and turned away their faces. Some ran wildly up and down the long beach, crying for help where no help could be. I found myself one of these, frantically imploring a knot of sailors whom I knew not to let those 2 lost creatures perish before our eyes. They were making out to me in an agitated way. I don't know how, for the little I could hear, I was scarcely composed enough to understand that the lifeboat had been bravely manned an hour ago and should do nothing. It couldn't do it. and that as no man would be so desperate as to attempt to wade off into the surge with a rope and establish communication with the shore, there was nothing left to try. When I noticed that some new sensation moved the people on the beach and saw them part and Ham come breaking through them, Ham, my old friend, coming to the front. I ran to him, as well I know, to repeat my appeal for help, but distracted though I was by a sight so new to me and terrible, the determination on Ham's face and his look out to sea suddenly awoke me to a knowledge of his danger. I held him back with both arms and implored the men with whom I had been speaking not to listen to him, not to do murder, not to let him stir off the sand for rescue. Another cry arose on the shore, and looking to the wreck, we saw the cruel sail with blow on blow, boom, boom, beat off the other two men, boom, 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 and fly up in triumph round the active figure left alone upon the mast with the hatchet. Against such a sight and against such determination as that of the comely, desperate man who was already accustomed to lead half the people present, I might as hopefully have entreated the wind. Master Davy, he said to me, cheerily grasping me by both my hands, if my time is come, 'tis come. If 'tain't, I'll bide it. Lord above bless you and bless all. Mates, make me ready. I'm a-going off. I was swept away, but not unkindly, to some distance where the people around me made me stay, urging, as I confusedly perceived, that he was bent on going, with help or without, and that I should endanger the precautions for his safety by troubling those with whom they rested. I don't know what I answered or what they rejoined, but I saw hurry on the beach and men running with ropes from a capstan that was there and penetrating into a circle of figures that hid him from my sight. Then I saw him standing alone in a seaman's frock and trousers, a rope in his hand, another round his body, and several of the best men holding at a little distance to the latter, which he laid out himself. Slack that rope upon the shore at his feet. The wreck, even to my unpracticed eye, was breaking up. I saw that she was parting in the middle, and that the life of the solitary man upon the mast hung by a thread. He'd lost his hatchet. Still he clung to the mast. He had a singular red hat on, a cap, but not a sailor's cap, but of a finer color. As the few yielding planks beneath him and destruction rolled and bulged, and his anticipative death knell rang, bung, 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 he was seen by all of us to wave it, to wave his cap. I saw him do it now and thought I was going distracted. Ham watched the sea, standing alone with the silence of suspended breath behind him and the shore before, until there was a great retiring wave, when, with a backward glance at those who held the rope behind him, the rope that was made fast round his body, he dashed in after the wave, and in a moment was buffeting the water, rising with the hills, falling with the valleys, lost beneath the foam, then drawn up again to the land. They hauled him in hastily by the rope. He was hurt. I saw blood on his face from where I stood, but took no thought of that. He seemed hurriedly to give them some directions for leaving him more free. Don't draw him in. Give him more slack on the rope. Or so I judged from the motion of his arm, and was gone as before into the surge. And now he made for the wreck, rising with the hills, falling with the valleys, lost beneath the rugged foam, borne in towards the shore, borne on towards the ship, striving hard and valiantly. The distance was nothing, but the power of the sea and the wind made the strife deadly. At length he neared the wreck. He was so near that one more vigorous stroke, he would be clinging to the wreck, when a high, green, vast hillside of water moving on shoreward from beyond the ship, he seemed to leap into it with a mighty bound. And the ship was gone, consumed by the wave. Some eddying fragments I saw in the sea, as if a mere cask had been broken. In running to the spot where they were hauling in on his rope. Consternation was in every face. They drew him to my very feet, insensible, dead. He was carried to the nearest house, and no one preventing me now. I remained near him, busy, while every means of restoration was tried. But he had been beaten to death by the great wave, and his generous heart was stilled forever. I also put into David Copperfield many of my own trials as a youth. I'd had a magnificent childhood. I discovered theatre when I was just a boy, 5, with my friend. We went to the Scottish play. We loved the witches. We came home and recreated the witches' scenes ourselves. Bubble, bubble, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron bubble. We were enchanted by the stage, and I thrived as a student. I was intelligent, creative, ambitious. But when I was 11, my father was thrown into that debtor's prison. The rest of the family went to live with him in the prison, as people did back then. But not me. I was put to work in a blacking shop, a shoe blacking shop. Nobody cared that I had to leave school, that I was a thriving student, a creative child, ambitious for knowledge. Nobody cared. I was just sent off to the blacking shop to black shoes, to pack shoe blacking, to wrap it up and put labels on it. 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. I toiled. There were rats at my feet. Rats in the basement, filling the basement. You could hear them down there screaming. I lived in constant fear that he would consume me. There was a huge window on the street and people watched us boys, a room of boys laboring away all day, 6 days a week. Finally, my father inherited some money from his mother. It was enough to get him out of debt so that they could leave debtor's prison. But my mother wanted me to stay working in the factory. She wanted me to stay there. She wouldn't let me leave. And I realized at that moment that nobody cared, that I was worthless, a meaningless brain, a creative force that needed no assistance. I realized that I was on my own, and my parents could not be concerned. And that's when I became fascinated by social justice and child labor. I'm not fomenting class conflict, I'm not. The class war has already started, the fighting is underway, and the aristocrats are winning it. I'm not fomenting it. I'm merely calling you to fight back. They've started the war and they're winning it. As I said, it is good to be back in America. These wide open spaces, these great plains, but you must abolish slavery. It's been gone 30 years in England. It is a heinous, heinous crime against humanity. I criticize England also. Our schools in England are appalling. You're taught nothing. Children are sent to schools as boarders to get them away from their parents. The headmasters are cruel, ignorant. It's a place to park your children, your unwanted children. Our child labor laws are almost non-existent. Children are worked to death. They die in these factories, and nobody is concerned. It is an era of anti-children, intimacy without responsibility, people having babies they don't want, people having abortions to eliminate the babies, Babies being left on the street, put up for adoption, raised by parents who don't care, raised by parents who put them in the workhouse to make money, and there they die or spend their entire life wasted. Death from sanitation, the children especially. And social inequality everywhere. I detest the Tories. They make me ill. And I realized, reading about Charles Dickens in Simon Cowell's writing, that he had embodied the acting that I learned in my first acting class in high school with Joe Wadlington. There was no mystery to Joe Wadlington's teaching. He wasn't trying to lead us to the Valhalla of the method or the Russian paradise, the Stanislavski area. He just wanted us to go on stage and be seen and heard and understood. He said louder, he said articulate, he said open up, he said use your body. And he trusted that we would find the emotions because he knew that we were teenagers and we had the emotions. He said read the script and trumpet it to the audience. It was a magical education. And when I got to college, they did everything they could to beat it out of me. They tried to teach me that acting was hocus pocus. There was a lot of mystery, a pursuit of truth, ideas that nobody understood, but they pretended to. And often you go see a production, you couldn't hear anybody. Simon Cowell was very critical of Charles Dickinson's acting. He said it was all energy, all emotion, all exposure. He said it can't last, it can't be controlled. That Charles Dickens was destroying himself, and he was. He was destroying himself. Why? He kept booking more tours. He wouldn't stop. He'd sometimes do 2 of these performances a day. The energy was electric, it was explosive, but it was killing him. He became sick and he kept going at it, and eventually he would die. Like Moliere, a victim of theater, because he invested
you're my lover, my lover.
in his performances. It was wild, it was crazy, and that's what brought him down eventually. But why? Why was he destroying himself? What was he running from? I don't think it was just the past, as he said. I think there were things in his present that he wanted to escape as well. I think he was trying to escape himself. I have been a criminal myself. I have been cruel. I denied my wife. I pilloried her in the newspaper, said that she was a bad mother, left her because she was heartless. It wasn't true. The fact is, I fell in love with a much younger woman. I was 45, she was 18, an actress. And I blamed my wife. I tried to explain it to England by saying she was a bad wife. And that was a lie. I drove my daughter Kate to marry a man she didn't love and who didn't love her, who would not take care of her. A loveless marriage. I drove her to it because she wanted to get away from me, my cruelty, the way I treated her, which was awful. I humiliated her, and she escaped me through a loveless marriage. My daughter Mamie, who doted on me, brought to me a young man whom she loved, whom she wanted to marry, and I said he was unsuitable. She never married. She was never happy after that. Again, because of my cruelty, my heartlessness. And when my son Walter died in India, I received the death notice. Was I devastated? No. My first thought was, my God, now I'll have to pay off his debts. I've made many mistakes. I've hurt many people. And I don't know if I'm a Christian. I portray myself both as a Christian and as not. But I do feel enormous guilt. So I must believe in something. I acted myself to death because I could not accept what I had done. A man with everything, and I had destroyed my family utterly. Destroyed my wife by leaving her for an inappropriate woman. Destroyed my children by denying them, being cruel and overbearing. and lost many of my friends because I knew not what it was to be a friend. I had great success of which I am quite proud. Novels that everybody read, a massive reading tour that everybody enjoyed and applauded. I made much money, built houses, massive success. My country had great success too. Great Britain, aptly named, for it was greater than any nation in history, richer, larger, more magnificent. But I also had heinous defeats, personal defeats, letting people down, denying them, being cruel, barbarous. Defeats that eventually destroyed me. In my country, Great Britain was capable of great villainy, outrageous villainy, to the world, to its own people, to the very inhabitants of its capital, dying on the streets the poor, children neglected, women abused. Hardly a great nation at all, when you think about it. But then I don't think this is unique to my age. I think it's true of your age as well. In fact, my age might be a perfect mirror for yours. Thus I end with an homage to both ages, yours, mine, all ages that settle for cruelty instead of generosity and kindness. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We're all going direct to heaven, we're all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. Thank you, and good night. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is John Fisher, and this has been Dickens. And we have been putting on live theater every week now since the beginning of COVID-19. This is our second show this week. And we've only been able to do it because people have turned up for the shows like you have. So thank you so much for being such a supportive audience tonight. If you'd like to make a donation to our theater to support these projects, you can do so on our website, therhino.org. That's THERHINO.org. Or you can mail it direct to me in my COVID-19 offices in my apartment, John Fisher, Theater Rhinoceros, 91 Central Avenue, number 102, San Francisco, California, 94117. Next week, I shall return with a piece called Saint John Fisher, and it's not autobiographical. He was a real saint at the time of Henry VIII. I hope you can join me for that. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Take care.